Okay, so we started the Hilchos Avodas Kochavim, and we are in the third installment of the history of the. In a book there's like an epilogue and a prologue. So this is kind of like the prologue of why people made the mistake, how they made the mistake, and basically the whole history of before Avraham came into play. And tonight we're going to talk about Avraham. As the Rambam begins, Halacha Gimel. I'm still waiting for people to ask me what the other two Rambams are that only discuss a history. I feel like now I know what my teachers went through teaching when none of the students were interested. So, okay, I'll wait. We'll start with Halacha Gimel anyways. Kivan shenigmal eitan zeh. Okay, how did we leave off Halacha Beis? Halacha Beis was that the Rambam's last word was Al derech ze haya ha'olam holach u'misgalgel ad shenolad amudo shel olam v'hu Avram Avinu. Right, there was all this nourish and tumult in the world, right, until Avraham Avinu came. So now Halacha Gimel is going to talk solely about what Avraham Avinu accomplished. Okay, a lot of this is Chazara, but the Rambam makes this, the way he writes it is a very, very beautiful, this is almost like a poetic, way of expressing the the accomplishments of Avraham and what he did and all the controversy and, at least where he was, how it was looked upon. So we say, Kivan shenigmal eitan zeh hitchil l'shotet b'daito. V'hu katan. So right after he was finished weaning, this Eitan, now it's interesting, the Rambam uses the word Eitan in describing Avraham because, as many of you know or don't know, the word Eitan or the name Eitan in Hebrew actually is a nickname for Avraham. In case you were wondering, now the word Eitan literally means strength, but in this, but that was his nickname. And he's referred to in Tehillim a few times. Lamatzeach, Alivnei Eitan, I think is ayin something or other in Tehillim. We talk about it a lot, and even in Yom Kippur and Ne'ilah, I think one of the Pizmonim we say is Ben Gimel Hikir Eitan is Boro. So we talk about Eitan, and if you're wondering who that is, it's not anyone you know. It's Avraham Avinu. That was his name, Eitan. So when he was young, the Rambam says he started to think, right? B'yom alayla v'hayatam hech efshar she'yeh hagalgal hazeh noeg tamid v'lo yeh lo manhig u'miyasav b'voso. So in the days before phones and Instagram, when people actually enjoyed life and appreciated what they saw outside and weren't glued to their phones, he actually made an observation. He saw the sun rise and set every single day. He saw the moon change during the month, and he's like, what up? How does all this work? Is there someone pulling the strings? Is there a manhig? Is there someone in charge? Ki efshar sheyasabe besatzmo. He said, last I checked, things don't work by itself. You need some kind of a force, right? You need some kind of action in order to generate a reaction. You need something driving all of these revolutions of the sun and the moon and the stars. So what was the problem? The problem is that he was the only one who actually thought about it and cared about it, which is hard to believe. But the Rambam says, "V'lo hayalo melamed, v'lo modia davar." He didn't have a rebbe. He didn't have a guide. He didn't have a madrich. Ela meshuka be'or kastim bein ovei kochavim hatipshim. The problem was location. He was in modern day West Village. Okay, a disgusting place filled with non-Jews who were tipshim, right? Who were idiots. And he was so intermingled with them, he's like, okay, let me just, melt in. So he melted in, and the Rambam states that he actually served with them. Although he did wonder how these things worked, and he was a little bit, for lack of a better word, curious, right? He, at least in the beginning, you know, served these avodah zaras with his people, right? He was dragged to these events. Filibo Mishotet Umavin, and he still was contemplating. Ad shehisig derech ha'emes, behavin kav hatzedek mitvunaso hanachona. Until he, as we would say today, he saw the light. Something clicked. One day it clicked. Biyada sheyesham eloka echad. He realized that there must be one God. V'hu manhig hagalgal v'hu bara hakol ve'ein b'kol hanimtze eloka chutz mimenu. And his conclusion was that the only way for this to operate is through a God. So one could always wonder this question when they're reading it, like, okay, so Avram came up with this big Einfall, with this big eureka moment, but like, why was that so revolutionary? Meaning, like, how many options were there? Meaning, if the concept of there being a God wasn't available to you, then you would never think to attribute something to a God. And if there is a God, then that's a very good option and explanation, right? Because maybe there is a God. It's like the philosopher Blaise Pascal, right, in the 1700s, where he basically said, "I'm not sure if there's a God or not. I'm just gonna be a good guy to be Yoitza so that I don't end up in hell in case there is a God." So whatever. There's a lot of discussions, and now's not the time for it. But there's a lot of philosophical quandaries back and forth as to what this Einfall, uh, I don't know how to explain that in English, was that Abraham, finally clicked that there, through process of elimination, there has to be a God. Okay. Anyways, getting that out of the way, the other Shakola Olam Toim, and once he realized this concept of monotheism, and now I understand how things work. If I'm right, then it must be that everybody else is wrong. And everybody is mistaken, and the thing that is causing them, right, is their mistaken notion of doing all this avodah zarah. Until they just completely lost the truth. And the Rambam says, "Ubein arba'im shana hikir Avraham esboro." So this is a very controversial statement. A lot of commentators, the Maratz Chayes, a lot of people point out that there's actually two or three different opinions as to what age Avraham had this eureka moment. If you remember, we had an Avodah Zarah about a year ago in Daf Yomi. It said that he was 3. Right, and the Ravid points this out also because it says Ekev Asher Shama Lakoli, and Ekev in Gematria is 172, and Avraham lived to be 175. So 172 of the 175 years, Avraham recognized God, and there were 3 years that he didn't. So that's one way of explaining why when he was 3. And the other explanation is the other Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Coincidentally, I believe it's Daf Tes Amud Aleph, where it talks about the first 2,000 years was Tohu, then Tohu Vavohu, then the second 2,000 is Torah, and then the last is Yemos HaMashiach, right? The world is divided into 3 quadrants. So what happened in the year 2000 in the Hebrew calendar? So in the year 2000, Avraham was 52, right? Because we said yesterday he was born in 1948. So that proves that, sorry, it doesn't prove anything. It just, it's a remez that Avram was 52. And I believe Tosfos, I didn't look it up, but Tosfos in Avodah Zarah discusses this 3-way machlokas, how old Avraham was. Either he was 3, he was 40, or he was 52. Now, it's hard to believe he was 52 when we all knew that story about him and breaking the idols with the axe. So That's a problem. But okay, we're not going to discuss everything in 15 minutes, but there's much, much, much beyond what meets the eye. So let me just continue from where we are. Ben Amazon Bara Kivin Jehikir Viyada Hitchel Lahashiv Chuvos Al B'nei or Kastim. Once he realized the truth, so he became the Chabad Shliach, right? He started to ask questions and go against the people in Or Kasdim. And he would actually have like these polemics, these debates. What you're doing is all shtut. The Shiber Hatzlamim, he started breaking the idols. And he started proselytizing and telling people that this is the way to do it. You only should serve the one God. And this is the God who you're going to bow down to and to be makrev and do libations, so that everybody from here on in knows. So, second, let me get my screen. Okay, so good. So far, so good. And he felt it fitting to destroy everything, all the idols and all the figures that we discussed yesterday. He was on a war path. He wanted to destroy all the avodah zarah. Now he was so successful that the king at that time, right? Anyone know who the king was? King Nimrod. Nimrod, very, very evil man. He wanted to kill Abraham because Abraham was trying to convert everyone to monotheism, and Nimrod did not like that. And it's funny, the Rambam doesn't go into it. Right? Sometimes he spends a lot of time on something, and then he just says, and a miracle happened. So why does the Rambam not say that this is the famous Kibshan Ha'esh? Right? There are many questions, by the way, not for now. Why the Kibshan Ha'esh, if it was such a, right? That was, I think, according to all the opinions, that was the very first test of Abraham. I believe when it lists the 10 Nisyonos, in Pirkei I forgot where it is, where it's listed. It's not in the Mishnah or anything. It's not in Pirkei Avos either, but Tzemachlok is what the 10 are, but everyone agrees that the first one was the Kibshan Ha'esh in Ur Kasdim. All right, why is that not written in the Torah? Very, very, a lot of speeches on that. Not for now, again. Okay, so what did he do? There was a miracle. He was saved. Great. And he went to Haran, right? Like the pasuk in Lech Lecha says. He started, right? He set up shop, right? He became the shliach. He says there is one God, and that God is fitting to serve. He went literally around the continent, and he was trying to, put tefillin on people. That's what his job was. Like the pasuk in Lech Lecha says. And when people were to ask him, say, hey, what is this religion about? Just like today, right? You want to be makar of someone. They say, what is this religion all about? So you start from the basics. And he would explain to them according to their understanding, until he converted them, Uravavos, tens of thousands, Vehem Anshe Beis Avraham. They are called Anshe Beis Avraham, Vishasal Belibam, and he put the seeds, literally, in their heart. Ha'ikar hagadol hazeh, the chiber bo svarim, and he wrote svarim, v'hodia Yitzchak beno, and he passed this on to Yitzchak, his son. What are these svarim, by the way? I think the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says that Avraham wrote Maseches Avodah Zarah. Anyone know how many chapters there were? I'll tell you, 500. There's a Tosfos over there that talks about it in the beginning of Avodah Zarah. Okay, V'yashav Yitzchak Melamed Umazhir, and he started to pass it on to Yitzchak. Yitzchak Hodiel Yaakov went on to the next generation. Uminahu Lilamed V'yashav Melamed Umachzikol Hanil V'melav, and he appointed people to sit and to teach, so that this Mesorah could continue. V'Yaakov Avinu Limed Banav Kulam, and then after Yaakov got it, he had his 12 sons. And now the Rambam says, V'hivdil Levi. Interesting. Yaakov picked out Levi. Levi was going to be Rosh. Okay? Levi was going to be the Rosh Yeshiva. V'hoshiva b'yeshiva lamed derech Hashem v'lilmod, v'lishmor mitzvahs Avraham. Levi was appointed the Rosh Yeshiva to continue this tradition. B'tziva es banav shelo yafsiku mibnei Levi, Mimena achar mimenu kedei shel yishkach halimud, and he commanded that it will be passed on from generation after generation, so that it shouldn't be forgotten. Vayihadavar holech, which, by the way, from Levi became the Kohanim. So there's again so much to talk about. Why Levi? Right? After all, Levi was Shimon and Levi weren't the best. He was cursed. Okay, not for now. And then we came Klal Yisrael. So things were good, but not for long, like every story. Until the Jews were settled in Egypt and they got too comfortable there. And they started to pick up the practices of the Egyptians. And to start doing Avodah Zarah, Chutz Mishevet Levi. Okay, Sha'amod b'mitzvahs avos. So I'm not sure if the Rambam is referring over here to Chet HaEgel, because we know that Levi did not, participate in the Chet HaEgel, right? Or if he's referring to in general, I think he's referring to in general, because I remember somewhere it says that even in Mitzrayim, the Leviim were already separated. So, okay. It was a short time later. And then that's it, right? It was going to go downhill. And we were about to plunge into Tumah. But because God remembered, right? This is like V'zacharti es Prisi Yaakov, right? God remembered us and the Shvuah. He said, I can't let these people be forgotten and lost. Asa Moshe Rabbeinu Rabban Shel Kol Hanaviyim U'Shlacho. Who saved the day, right? It was Moshe Rabbeinu. Kivan shenisna Moshe Rabbeinu b'achar Hashem Yisrael anachla. Right, Moshe was prophesying, and God picked us. Lanachala hiktiran b'mitzvos. We had Har Sinai. We were given mitzvos. V'hodiam derech avodaso. Right, and we were taught the way to serve God. Umayi hiya mishpat avodas kochavim chol haTorah machareha. It's funny how the Rambam ends this, and he says, and we were taught at Har Sinai the mitzvos and all of the rules and regulations of Hilchas Avodah Zarah, and those who stray after that. Okay, so that's how the Rambam basically is about to introduce. We're not going to do now, unless everyone wants to, but that's how he introduces Perek Beis, which actually goes into the details of Avodas Kochavim. But in order to get to that, we had to start from Adam, literally, to Enosh, to the people sinning, to Avram realizing that everything until then was all shtus, and then the Jews were saved by Moshe, and Moshe taught us the halachos of Avodah Zarah that I am about to teach you in Perek Beis. Very, very beautiful introduction, and it's going to be many, many years until we get to the next Rambam in the Mishnah Torah that discusses the history of a mitzvah. Good night. Tomorrow I will not be able to teach. I have